which was like, very brave to do for his directorial debut to sort of include that in there was like, quite brave because obviously, that could evoke sort of certain emotions out of people. People are very like, sometimes can be anti that, which isn't correct. So very, very brave of him to do.
And apparently, it's not being shown in India, or only a very limited way.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back. The Eye of the Storm podcast. Oh my God, the Eye of the Storm podcast. I don't know what happened to my pronunciation there. Sorry. I'm back with my boys Daniel Hervey.
Yo.
Hi.
But before we get into the main discussion, guys, best recent thing that we've watched.
I actually forgot we do this.
We give you like an hour and then we come back and.
Yeah, no. It's I actually do have one. So in preparation for the new Planet of the Apes movie coming out, I'm introducing my girlfriend to the original trilogy to catch her up. So we've just watched the first Planet of the Apes movie. So that's kind of like, setting the world where they start injecting the apes with this drug to make them smarter. So you got the main character that's trying to save his dad, yada yada yada. I'm sure most people have seen Planet of the Apes, but that is still as much as I remember it being, it's a great movie. I really enjoyed it a lot. Sets it up really well for the second movie, and I'm really looking forward to watching the other two in the series. So Planet of the Apes is mine, nice, short and sweet.
Best thing I watched this week was season 3 of The Orville. I'd seen the first 2 seasons a while ago, and I finally got around to seeing the third season. And it's quite mixed overall. Like there was a whole bunch of episodes that I liked more than I liked the others, but overall I'm amazed that somebody made this show. Still, it feels like a throwback to like 20 years ago in terms of how shows were made, but with modern, made from a modern perspective and with modern production values and stuff like that. And it's really interesting to see how far this Star Trek fan fiction has come, basically, because it does some big things in the third season, and with big character, like with really deep character arcs, and to the point where I almost think it's the best Star Trek ever made, even though it's not real, like not official Trek. Some episodes I kind of sat through, but out of 10 episodes, maybe 6 or 7 are really outstanding.
Okay. Daniel, what is maybe a good starting point for Star Trek? Because I know Star Trek is massive and massive pop culture phenomenon, but I've never watched it. I've never really been interested in it, and I know you say obviously the Orville is like a really good series, but where's maybe a movie that could be just a bit of a beginner's gateway into that type of world?
Movie specifically or show?
Movie, because movie's shorter, and I probably would have time to
That's tough because the Star Trek there are a bunch of Star Trek movies, and they all come after the show, right? Okay. So you're supposed to know the characters and the premise and the world and everything. And the movies are probably weaker than the show because they have to be big budget, and so they need lots of spectacles so that lots of people go see them. And lots of people, myself included, basically think that the movies ruined Star Trek, basically, because they had to deviate from what was interesting about Star Trek in the first place. In terms of movies, it's actually kind of tough because Star Trek has this aspirational future in it, right, where it imagines a world in which basically we've gotten our act together. Now we go out into the stars to explore, and we discover other civilizations that are often an allegory for today's problems. And they are looked at from the point of view of people who have become better than that, right? So I don't really have a movie recommendation that gives you that kind of thing. I don't think the 2000, like the J.J. Abrams Star Trek movies, of which there are 3, really cut it, because they are kind of like that. I don't think they're a good entry point. Honestly, in terms of quality, I would recommend The Orville because it is basically Star Trek: The Next Generation, but made with modern attitudes, basically. Because Star Trek: The Next Generation is probably the one that's most accessible, because the others are either a response to it or are even older. But the problem is it's a 35-year-old show. It started in the late 80s. And there's a lot of filler in it, and it takes a while to get good and so on. So I would highly recommend, like if you're interested in that kind of show, I would actually just start watching Star Trek: The Next Generation or The Orville. Just sample both of them, just the first couple of episodes each, and see if you like it. The Orville is a lot shorter because there's only 30 episodes, whereas for The Next Generation there's 7 seasons, I think, of 22 episodes each. So there's a lot of stuff, and it can be hard to figure out what's worth watching and what isn't. Like, the good is really good, but there's also a lot of filler and a lot of nonsense in there. But in terms for movies, it's not been fashionable for a long time. And even official Star Trek isn't like that anymore.
Okay. Fair enough.
Well, yeah, I think I'll, end up joining the Star Trek train.
I mean, from how you described it, it seems, unless you're like, really like wanting to, and you're like, really trying to find your entry point, it seems like Star Trek may be one of those franchises that possibly die out, just because, like you said, they haven't made it accessible for new people, because you have to know the original series and you have to know the original characters, so that if there is like a Star Trek movie coming out next year, it's a little bit more difficult to, just kind of go out and see it, because you need to know. And this ties into our Monday topic that we're going to talk about on Monday, about sort of having to have previous knowledge of like previous like sort of content or movies or shows before going into the next one. So that probably makes it a little more difficult for people to get into it.
Yeah, there's just a lot of it made over decades, and like the variance is very high. Like, some of it is really bad, some of it is really excellent. So it's can be hard to just say, okay, go watch this one episode, and that's Star Trek.
So you have
slightly off topic. Is this a cautionary tale for cinematic universes, for like Marvel, for example, where you've got so much content that it eventually becomes quite difficult to then find your entry point into it? Is it a bit of a cautionary tale? Do you see comparisons to it, or not at all?
So one of the interesting things about Star Trek is that there was a show in the 60s, right, which ran for, I think, 3 seasons, was a moderate success, and then really got popular in the following decade in syndication. And then in the late 80s, 88 or 89, they did The Next Generation, and it basically moved the timeline forward by 50 years and created a new status quo with a new ship, new crew, new characters, new alien species, and all of that. And you could, like, if you had watched the original series, I think you had an additional appreciation for The Next Generation. But you could just start watching, like, this was like TV in the around 1990, right? So you couldn't count on people having seen anything else. And so it was written as a fresh start. And I think that is something that a lot of franchises get wrong, where they water down the concept to appeal to new audiences, right? To appeal to more people, and make it easier for new audiences, and the new audience is what they want at the expense of the old audience often. When actually what they should be doing is to have kind of jumping like on-ramps occasionally, right? Like every couple of years or once a decade or whatever. I think there should just be a new series that goes forward in the timeline and is written like as a fresh start, where you don't have to know specific characters or events or something like that, but still within the same universe. And I think Star Trek: The Next Generation did that once, and there's very, very little that has successfully done this, I think.
Yeah.
And I think this is what Phase 4 in the MCU should have been, right? Where it's basically, okay, the Infinity Saga is one thing, and it's got a big beginning, middle, and end. And now we start something new, and if you want to keep going from the old stuff, you're welcome, and we're glad you're here. But also, if 22 movies or whatever is too big, like too much of a commitment, we were going to tell the story in such a way that you can start here. And I think that's what they should have done and didn't really. And if they had, I think it would be in better shape.
Yeah.
So we have to embark on the long journey. There's no shortcuts, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, more like instead of having one big journey, maybe have a couple of medium-sized journeys.
No, I'm talking about for Star Trek. Okay. So you're suggesting that we should have medium-sized journeys.
Yeah, and then that actually, like, I think the movie industry is terrified of endings, because if there's an ending, people can stop going. And I think that's kind of what happened with Endgame, that a lot of people stopped going after Endgame thinking that's the end. And Disney tried to keep as many people from thinking that as possible by making it not seem like a fresh start. But actually, that's what they would have needed, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's why we're not getting good endings in a lot of cases, because if you have an ending, that's an excuse to stop going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's bad for customer retention, which is really what everybody wants.
Well, what I watched, surprisingly, I actually thought I wasn't gonna have anything, but then I remembered I'm currently on, I think, episode 4 or 5, I'm not too sure, of Three Body Problem, and I'm starting to like it. I think the stakes are getting high now, especially when I don't know what she is. I don't know if she's an AI or if she's an alien. I don't know what exactly she is, but the one that's that was talking to, the two scientists, the big guy. Oh, sorry, Daniel.
Daniel,
I forgot that you haven't watched that. I forgot that you stopped watching it. But yeah, Daniel, it gets interesting. I'll be honest with you. It definitely gets interesting, especially when she kills the big guy. I don't know what his name is, but when she killed him, I was like, oh, that was unexpected. So the stakes definitely does get. I think it definitely does get more engaging. So Daniel, I'd say give it another shot, maybe. But
does it change in tone from the first episode at all, or is the first half hour representative of how it feels? That was my big problem.
No, it's not the first. It's not the opening of it. It's pretty much still kind of like the first episode, to be fair. But obviously, the mystery gets a little bit more unraveled and stuff like that. But yeah.
But yeah, what about the tone was it that you didn't like again?
Kind of like just tone and feel. Just didn't feel interesting.
Okay, I get what you're saying, because I felt the same way as after episode 2, I believe. But I think episode 3. So episode 4. What episode was it where the guy got killed? Was it episode 4 or 3?
Maybe 5.
Okay, so I'm on 5 then. Damn. But yeah. So I think it does get in. I think it was 4 maybe, but
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but it does get interesting. Cause I felt the same after episode 2. That's when I didn't kind of go back to it after a couple of, maybe like a week or two, until Hervé suggested it again. I was like, okay, let me go back onto it. So I think episode 3, 4, it starts to get interesting. So I'd say maybe give it another shot. Who knows? But yeah. But yeah, that was mine, guys. But yeah, the main event.
Then we're all here. So yeah, Monkey Man. Dev Patel's directorial debut. Jonathan, what did you think?
A very good debut. The Indian John Wick. This was a fun film. I think Daniel might agree with this. I think this was way funner than Godzilla and King Kong. Yeah.
Whatever else is going on with that movie, it's a real movie.
Yeah, so yeah, this was definitely a fun film. You could definitely see the John Wick influence or inspiration either way. You could, especially with there was I think it was like an overhead shot of when they were fighting. Yeah. So yeah, that sorry about that. I thought there was something going on. I thought there was technical difficulties there, but it's all good. My audios are good. But yeah, yeah, so I think you definitely saw the John Wick influences, which I liked a lot. And you saw I would say even though the film was like, it was kind of like that wasn't the vehicle, but the whole social injustice and highlights of the corruption in India and the treatment of women, you see highlights of that as well. I wouldn't say that was the vehicle of the film. The vehicle of the film was obviously him. I forgot his main character, but him getting revenge for, what the police officers did to his family. I'm not gonna say who per se, because that would be kind of like spoiling it. I believe so, but I did like how they managed to show bits and bobs of the social injustice and pretty much what's going on in India. Because obviously I'm not really educated in this topic, so I wouldn't know the accuracy of what was being shown. But from what was being shown and being able to do that, as well as make this a fun movie, an action-packed movie, it was quite impressive. Do you know what I'm saying? And I do think there. And also, what I really, no, I'm gonna save what I really liked for later on. But overall, I think it was a fun film. I wouldn't say it was a really good debut film. Definitely a really good debut film. If this was like his third, fourth movie, then I'd say it was good, but not really good. So I'll say well done.
This was very enjoyable. This was a very, very good movie. I'd say it's not perfect, but it was really good. This is what The Beekeeper should have been. But it was like a good old, good old fashioned, revenge movie. The action was very brutal in this. Like the action was like really good and it was really brutal. It kind of reminded me of like John Wick 3. I think of all the John Wicks I watched, I feel like John Wick 3, if I remember correctly, was like probably one of the most brutal ones that I watched. But it was like very like hard hitting, very good action scenes. I know you touched on like some of these social injustices that it kind of like highlighted in there. Again, I'm not an expert in the culture, but I thought like, some of the imagery, some of the scenery that he showed, like for example, like when there's like 15 people sleeping all in like one room or something like that. They showed something, obviously like some of the slums and stuff like that. Obviously they showed the Hijras, which I did a little bit of research on, which was like kind of like the transgender, sort of like people that he went to kind of go, that took him in and, went through like the healing process and kind of like, helped him towards the end of the movie as well, which was like, very brave to do for his directorial debut to sort of include that in there was like, quite brave because obviously, that could evoke sort of certain emotions out of people. People are very like, sometimes can be anti that, which, isn't correct. So very, very brave of him to do.
And apparently it's not being shown in India or only a very limited way.
Yeah, I did see that because if I remember correctly, I think it was like maybe kind of going against some like the right wing thinking or something like that in India. So it wasn't sort of necessarily being shown there. So I did see that as well. Yeah, I mean, obviously, like the second act probably like was a little bit slower. Obviously, after you get like the big sort of kind of the climax of like the first act, where suddenly again, I don't want to say spoilers. I don't want to say spoilers yet, but there's like kind of like a bit of a climax for like Act 1. Then it kind of like goes into a little bit of a lull in Act 2, and that's kind of where you want the story to have something interesting to say. Did it? I don't know because I fell asleep for part of Act 2, so I won't comment too much on that. What I would say about maybe what I didn't completely like is that when they're doing like the flashbacks of like him and his mom when they're younger and this, that, and the other, and it's like kind of like showing why he's doing what he's doing or like the motivation of it. I feel like they were very slow to kind of like unravel the mystery, and it was like it's very obvious what we're trying to do, and there was actually like a bigger like thing beyond that. So like, you have like his mom being killed, which is like, it's pretty standard for like revenge movie or like that. He had his mom being killed. But then there was like the bigger thing of like, the like that was like a relatively small thing compared to like everything else that was going on in that situation, basically. So it just kind of felt like that was like I didn't quite like every time that they tried to cut back to like him and his mum and this and the other. It was like, okay, I kind of get the point basically. Every time they did the cutback, but overall, very enjoyable movie. I liked it a lot. Very good action, and yeah, very good movie.
So I thought that, especially as a first movie, this was quite good. It's definitely one person's vision as opposed to something written by committee or something that has been messed with to the point beyond recognition. And the last two movies we reviewed were kind of like that, right? So this was kind of refreshing to just have a story being told. I am a little bit more negative about it than I think the two of you are. Part of that is that I actually don't think it's Indian John Wick, or rather only the first half is Indian John Wick. The second half basically stops having a plot and only works on an allegorical and symbolic level. And it's basically just an hour or 45 minutes of just rage and anger. And that is basically the level on which it works. And I think that it does fairly well. The problem is that's the second half is completely different from the first half. And in order to really enjoy the movie, you kind of have to like both parts. And I think the difference is too big and too unearned to really land with most audiences, I think. Because if you like one, you probably dislike the other. At least I certainly enjoyed the second half a lot less than the first half because of that. But other than that, I thought it was really, really quite good. And I'm honestly a little bit surprised it got made because of how belligerent it is in a good way.
But I'm confused. I'm not confused. I understand where you're coming from, but wasn't so one thing I actually mentioned which I disliked was the whole transition from him being a good fighter to a great fighter. I think that part wasn't really fleshed out really, because obviously when we saw his first encounter with the police officer that killed his mom, obviously, he was struggling as a fighter, cool. And then obviously the last encounter where he fought him again and where he fought all those other guys, I just feel like that wasn't really fleshed out a lot. I think that they kind of just gave that to us. Obviously, we saw his little training camp and we just saw him, punching a bag and stuff. And it was like, it was more of a spiritual awakening, which gave him the skill of being able to beat up so many fighters, which is what was telling me. I was like, okay, I didn't really like that because, what is it? What is this movie really about? Is it him? Did he learn all of these fighting techniques? Because before he was still beating up people in the first scene, but he was struggling. Like the struggle was, we saw the struggle and was way more in comparison to the second, to his second like awakening, let's say. So I was like, okay, so, yeah, I felt it was more like, I don't know what they were trying to tell us. Is this more, did he learn his fighting techniques from a spiritual awakening, or was it a mixture of both? Obviously, because he was punching the bag. If it was a mixture of both, then they kind of should have shown us a bit more. But I get it's a movie, they can't really show us a bit too much. Cool, I get that. But Daniel, what you were saying in terms of like it was two films, I saw it as him evolving. So when you say they should have kept it like the second half, what was the first half like to you?
So I think both halves are fine for what they are. They're just very different things, and I don't think they're that compatible. So the first half is very literal, very linear, very focused, right? That is entirely the story about somebody infiltrating high society in order to kill this one person. And it's very methodical, and it shows all the different steps he goes through, and it shows him just essentially a regular guy who is on this mission and is essentially on a suicide mission, right? Because he knows he's not going to survive it. Or at least that's the likely outcome, right? And he's presented as not an action hero who can survive anything until he does, right? So that is one thing. I think the second half, on the other hand, is purely it's almost a dream sequence. Like even the part after he leaves the temple, that also mostly works on a symbolic level. And I think I picked up on maybe 10% of it because I'm not familiar with the subtleties of Indian culture and mythology and politics. So I picked up on the really obvious stuff, like who the bad guys were and stuff like that. But there's a whole bunch of references to things, especially mythological ones, that I just didn't get. And that's another topic I want to bring up later. But his whole transformation thing, that was purely symbolic. That did not make any literal sense. And that is only a problem because the first half of the movie, and it is almost exactly half, I checked my watch while I was watching it, is very literal, right? So that I found quite jarring, and I don't know that it makes it a better movie.
I understand where you're coming from now. I get it. I'm not, by the way, what I'm about to say isn't like a counter argument. Well, it is kind of like a counter argument, but it's kind of like playing D's advocate. So, so we already know. I don't personally, cause I heard it mention something I didn't necessarily agree with. I don't know if it was you or Hervé. I don't know which one. I don't know if it was you or Hervé, but you said, I think it was you, Daniel, because I thought his main motivation was the revenge. Obviously, was to get revenge for the killing of his mother. I do get, obviously, there was bigger plays at hand in terms of like there were bigger stakes that he was fighting for when it comes to obviously the social injustices that was going on in India. So it was like he was kind of like killing this guy for India. But personally, the reason why I think there were two parts of the film, because you say it was very linear, but that's because it was very linear because obviously there was it was a mystery that's being unfolded. You know what I'm saying? But now that we know the mystery, so they have to kind of like enter a new phase. So
I don't think it was because of the mystery of why he's doing this. I think it was because it's entirely focused on the mechanics of how does he infiltrate this place and how does he get to his target. Like that is why it's a very linear story.
But at the same time, was trying to understand why it is that he wants to kill this guy, because I think we find out halfway in the film that he is the one that killed him.
We found it in the 7 flashbacks.
Yeah. So I do get what we're saying. Yeah, 100%. But at the same time, we're still on the journey of discovery. So it's kind of you're bound to get two stories. You know what I'm saying? You're bound to get two style of stories.
Not really. Like you could have had the second half where, in a way that works like on the same terms as the first half. I mean, it would be a very different second half, right? Like all the specifics would be different. But this wasn't necessary. It's because he wanted it to be this way.
So are you saying so you said you enjoyed the second half more, or was it the first half?
First half.
First half, okay.
I'm very literally minded.
Yeah.
So things like allegory and symbolism, I get it, but it bores me. Right? Just in general, like in any movie, I want it to make literal sense.
Could we say the second half was due to the fact that they were pretty much that was like the Indian culture at play, as in because when you see like obviously this is not an Indian film because it is an Indian film, but it's not an Indian film. We had a discussion last time because it was produced in America, even though they want to shoot in India.
As far as I know, it's not made by somebody who grew up in India and experienced.
Yeah. But would you say that the second half, because to make it kind of like to not make it too American, the second half was okay. Now let's incorporate India pretty much into the film. Do you think that's the reason why it kind of like it was? Because at the same time, like it is two movies in one. It's like an American film and an Indian film. So they kind of try to. Do you think they?
The guy is British, like Indian British, right?
Oh, so yeah, sorry.
It's not American.
Sorry, American. Apologies. Yeah, you're British. So do you think they tried to incorporate two styles? Well, they did do two styles in one, but they tried to, they just tried to fit both. Both styles in one. I don't
think there's a practical reason for why this split happens. I think it's an artistic choice, and I think it's one that doesn't work.
Okay.
Or at least makes the movie worse.
Okay.
Because the first movie is entirely about one guy going through the steps of getting revenge for a specific event against a specific person, and the second half is basically the oppressed of India rising up. Right. That's like the entire symbolism is about that. Right. It's about the quasi-fascist movement that's running things has turned India into something it shouldn't be, and large chunks of real India have been kind of suppressed and moved and shoved out of sight and below the surface, and this is now reasserting itself. Right, this is the whole thing about the roots, and this is the whole thing about the temple and all of that. Right, that's what all that is about. And when he takes I kept thinking of the Water of Life scene in Dune where he takes that hallucinogen and it kind of gives him the spiritual awakening and becomes a superhero. It was kind of very similar to Dune in some way, but clearly not intentional. But like when he rips open his chest and like light comes out, like that's obviously symbolic, right? Yeah. But the entire sequence only makes sense in that symbolic, on that symbolic level, and that is completely different from the first half. That's kind of what I'm getting at. That it like I was genuinely disoriented when that started, because it was not the movie I had been watching in that hour plus up to that point.
I'm really annoyed I fell asleep. Well, like I was like so in and out of sleep during this period, so I remember like some of those scenes, but I was just like so in and out of it that it's just annoying that I don't have like much to add to it. But like, because like to me, like the flow of the movie, and understanding sort of like how you kind of get from like the first part to like his failed attempt to like assassinate sort of the police officer, to then discovering the bigger play at hand and understanding that obviously like his mother was killed, but like the reason she was killed was because of like this oppression that was happening to kind of like the wider community in a sense. To me that makes sense, and to me like the logical progression of like having that first part to the second part makes sense, and all the symbolism stuff and whatever I probably missed because I didn't completely like watch all of that section of it. But I don't know. I didn't feel that disorientated. Again, I was like half asleep, but I didn't feel as disorientated as you did, kind of going from one to the other, especially because, after his failed attempt, he kind of had to like do a bit of like self-discovery because, he's been carrying this rage and this hate for like, so long. And like, he's discovered people that can maybe like help him like understand it, channel it, and this, that, and the other. And again, I don't know entirely the specifics of it, but from like kind of what I'm like picturing or piecing together was just like him then going through that like self-discovery journey essentially, which he hadn't done previously in his life up until that point, which then made sense. And then again, you then have again the wider play at hand of like, yeah, your mother died, but the reason she died was because of this like wider context.
Yeah. Like when I said it felt disorienting, it's mostly because suddenly the rules had changed. Like previously there was no such symbolism and no such dream logic.
Yeah.
And I found it jarring, and I think a bunch of other people did too. But it clearly didn't ruin the movie for everybody, and it didn't really ruin the movie. But it's more like I think the movie got worse at that point because it stopped making sense in the way the first half had been quite strong actually.
Yeah.
But would you say that could it be considered as an awakening?
Well, it is a symbolic awakening, right? It is. At that point, he stops being a person and starts being a symbol for the oppressed of India having an awakening and rising up. That's what that is about. Right?
So that's the thing. This is why I'm kind of getting confused, because generally how awakenings are done is like of you're a completely different person to what you end up being when you are awakened. So it's like, what exactly about that? Because I get you said it started off very linear and you said more stuff, but like what? But he had to be a different person, and it had to be like a different tone.
But it's not him, right? It's not him having an awakening. It's everybody having one.
Everybody as in
like he at that point he becomes symbolic for all the oppressed ever.
In terms
that's how I read it. Like because if you think of him as an individual, it doesn't make sense.
But when you say
at least that's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. But when you say for everyone, do you mean as in like the people around him, like obviously the
so like everybody who's been dispossessed and has been oppressed throughout India in any way. Like there's this whole thing about when he earns the money for the temple, right, so that they can pay the tax bill, right? He includes a note saying, "Remember who you are. It's time to remember who you are," or something. And I think that is I don't remember if that was immediately before or after the transformation scene. But the whole thing is about like we've been kind of swept under the rug and marginalized, and it's time to rise up and put an end to that. Right? That's this. I think we're going in circles, but I thought it was very clearly that's what that scene was saying. But it's not about him as an individual anymore at that
point. Okay.
I mean, speaking on the first act, because it seems like all of us kind of like really enjoyed that. I felt like that was a really good like kind of like opening to the movie in terms of like you said how like he was like infiltrating sort of the higher sort of society and this, that, and the other. I felt like all of it was done sort of super clever, especially like when he like stole the woman's purse and then like kind of like played it off as like she like found it and like fed it back to her and got a job out of it. Even with what's the short character's name again? I can't remember.
Psychic. I call him his psychic. Yeah.
It's like when even with like his psychic when he says like obviously come to this, bet on this happening and whatever like that. It was just all like actually done quite intelligently, which was like again a little bit refreshing to see, and it was like really it was just like really easy to get on board with that. I thought it was like really well done, the opening.
It was very tightly plotted. It all the steps made sense. There were no leaps of logic. Even I wasn't bothered by the social commentary. Like that's one of my big bugbear of lazy social commentary. And there's a few places where they tell rather than show. But for the most part, it was just woven into the milieu. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by that.
Yeah.
And it was for the most part, it made its point without dwelling on it or putting too fine a point on it, and just showed this. I mean, it's still cartoonish, but it's like they just showed an environment, right? This is what the elite is like. This is what the rich are like. This is how everything is corrupted. Everything from business to religion to the military through the police. Everybody's complicit in it, and anybody who isn't part of that club is basically left out in the street. Right? That was a very clear point, and they made it over and over. And I thought for the most part they made it quite well.
Yeah, that's the thing with social commentary. Sorry, is that like there isn't an issue putting it in the movie or in any story you want to tell, but it just has to be done in the right way. It just has to be done cleverly. And I think
you have to create a situation, and it has to unfold logically in a way that is believable, and otherwise it's just a polemic. Yeah. And this is maybe 10% polemic and 90% proper story.
Question: I was gonna say, did you guys see? did any of you say that there wasn't any John Wick influences? I don't know if anyone said.
Where they outright reference him once, right?
Okay.
No, but what I mean is, like, when I say it's not really Indian John Wick, that's because of the second half. First half very clearly is along the same vein.
But I was gonna say, how do you think, in terms of, like, we see the whole John Wick influences when it comes to the fight scenes, etc. How did you feel about that? Did you like, for example, the fight choreography? Did you like, the aesthetics, the way that the film looked?
For the most part, like I have very low standards at the moment, because I think a lot of action is done really poorly, where it's either just a CGI fest or it's very basic. And this one remembered the basic rule of use your environment. And there were a whole bunch of places where they did, right? Like where fight scenes incorporated the environment and people used like things as improvised weapons, and the way the fight scene unfolded was determined by its environment for the most part. There were also some really nice shots in there, like towards the very end, where he's standing on the bar and he's like backlit by these bottles of alcohol. Remember the rimmer shot? Like there's this orange wall, basically, that's kind of the back of the bar, and they are basically fighting on the bar. I thought that was a pretty cool shot.
And
there's a few of those throughout the movie, and I thought for the most part it was a bit above average.
I really enjoyed the the final fight scene between him and the police officer. I felt like him just kind of being dominant and overpowered was actually like quite refreshing to see for like and a protagonist in the movie, and how he was like quite like ruthless in it. Like he didn't hold his punches or whatever like that, and he was just like just quite brutal in everything that he was doing in that. I felt like that was like really good protagonist again, because like I'm not often a fan of like the hero of the story, and of course this isn't your typical like kind of like superhero or whatever like that, but he did have like some really like bad, even when he was just like kind of like dodging the punches and stuff like that, it was just like cool shots, cool action for me.
So personally, I feel like there was a heavy John Wick influence. Do you think enough of the character's uniqueness was shown? Because like I said, there was a heavy John Wick influence, and obviously this is not a John Wick film, this is a Monkey Man film. So do you think we know Monkey Man enough as a character?
I mean, the whole Monkey Man thing was kind of a misdirection, right? Like he doesn't actually, like, he uses the monkey mask to be a prize fighter, right? In the fighting ring, and I'm not actually sure why. Was it just a gimmick, or did he need to be anonymous? And if so, why? I don't like.
Sorry, I'm sure some of the other fighters had like masks on as well, so I don't know whether it was just like a gimmick or like they had to put on like, do you know, like in like wrestling where they like put on like certain characters and stuff like that just to make it a little bit more entertaining or something like that. So maybe it was something like that. I'm not quite sure.
Wasn't there a scene where they were saying what the white monkey actually represents?
That's the thing I was building up to, because the way I understood the story is that the white monkey became too powerful and was then punished by the gods and had his power taken away and was basically left in the dirt. And I'm not sure that maps to the story.
Not at all. I'm not that I can remember anyways.
So and then he kind of adopts the white monkey persona, and he bleaches the monkey mask so it becomes white, and then he puts it on, but then he takes it off immediately. Right? Like the priests actually wear masks for the most part. They do take them off during the fight, but they do wear these masks. And it would have been nice if that had been explained, what the significance of that costume was, because it's been said that there were warriors once and are now rediscovering their heritage. Right? That is why they joined the fight. But if there was symbolism associated with the costumes, the movie didn't tell me. But Kid as well just takes off the monkey mask as after I think before he throws the first punch, right? He just wears it as he walks up to the building and then takes it off immediately. And I didn't understand what the point of that was. Like, first of all, the story doesn't seem to map to his character arc, right? Because it's not like he was powerful, like only in the loosest sense, in that it kind of ties into this idea of the country is being taken over by something that's robbing us of our heritage, and we have to reassert ourselves to claim it back. But then why doesn't he wear the mask, and why doesn't he doesn't like. When I saw the trailer, I thought he would lead a popular uprising using the white monkey mask kind of as a trademark or as a persona, but that's not what happens in the movie. He also doesn't have to hide his identity, which is also the other reason to wear a mask, right? You can wear a mask to protect your identity, or you can wear it to become a symbol, and he doesn't do either in this. So I don't know that part works.
Do you think we just missed the symbolism? So do you think that, for example, Indian people, when they watch this, they will understand way more than us? And if that is the case, do you think that okay, if that is the case where we just missed out on the symbolism, does that mean that obviously they didn't really do a good job when it comes to, conveying the messages that they were trying to convey?
That's kind of an issue with the movie as well, where who is it for? Because if it's for an Indian audience, or maybe the Indian diaspora that knows this stuff but isn't in India and therefore can watch the movie, and is maybe watching this from a distance and maybe feels powerless or frustrated at watching this and not being able to do anything about it. If it's for them, isn't the story a bit basic? Like it doesn't seem to go into any kind of detail or I don't know. I can just imagine being in that position and then saying, okay, I understand what this is going, and I appreciate that somebody's telling the story, but isn't this just the Cliff Notes version? But if it's just the basic version, just so that somebody has told the story and it's trying to raise awareness of what's going on, shouldn't you explain more? Right? Because I understood what was going on because I've read the news, right? Like I've read about these things going on over the years occasionally without it being a particular interest. It's just something that comes up every once in a while, right? And so I knew who they were talking about, right? When they talked about who's doing this and who the victims are and so on. But the movie itself doesn't explain. It goes out of its way to not explain. And I don't know who will be satisfied by this movie.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe it's a thing where they didn't want to get too political. So it feels like this film was intended to be like.
That was the goal.
Sorry?
If that was the goal, then Task failed successfully.
Funny, yeah, but at the same time, I feel like they want, like, the main goal for this film was for it to be. It's actually hard to say, because I was gonna say the main goal for this film was for it to be like a fun film, but it's very hard making.
It's not fun. This is pure rage and anger.
Yeah, well, when I say fun, in terms of
I don't think you know this. Sorry to interrupt. I don't think this is even catharsis. I think this is just pure articulation of anger.
Right. I get what you're saying. I was meaning from like an entertainment value. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's like it was presented to us as like could we say it was presented to us as an Indian John Wick film from the trailer?
The trailer made it look that way, yes.
Yeah. Exactly. So you know what I'm saying? So it was presented to us like that. So I'm guessing they wanted to, maybe they'll use it as a vehicle to actually spread the message. Who knows? But I took it as, okay, they had two goals: make this a fun film in terms of like the entertainment value from the action scenes, but at the same time spread awareness. Can the two work then? That's my question.
I think if this is for a general audience and the purpose is to raise awareness, then you would need to have explained more. Like, for example, the victims of all of this, like the land dispossessions and the stripping of civil rights and all of that, like the recipients of that are the Muslim minority in the majority Hindu states, right? The movie goes out of its way to not make them seem Muslim. Like it not only does it not say it also in the way people are presented. Like I don't know if maybe that is how that community is in that particular place. But if you want to communicate to an audience, there are certain ways of doing this. That this is a Muslim minority that's being persecuted by a Hindu majority, right? And the movie goes out of its way to avoid both. And I'm not sure why exactly, because it's not like this movie is, like I said earlier, quite belligerent, right? Like it doesn't sugarcoat anything. It's not even hiding an allegory or anything like that, right? It's outright swinging. Like it comes out swinging, right? And it's very clearly yelling at very specific people. And if you're doing that, and if you're trying to raise awareness of that, and you're trying to rally people around that, why do you not explain what's going on?
Good point. It feels like.
What did you get? Did you get that from those flashback scenes about who was doing what and to whom? because I knew from background context, but I didn't need to watch the movie for that. And the movie, I thought the movie didn't add anything to that in terms of educating people.
Well,
like I did not come out of the movie knowing more about that conflict than I did going in.
Yeah, you're right. The flashbacks for me personally was just a revelation of why he's so angry.
Yeah.
So you're saying that there was no point of the flashbacks.
So first of all, having 7 flashbacks already is excessive. I think the movie would have been stronger by just having an opening scene that shows how he lost his mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then you fast forward 15 years to him being in the big city and being on that path of revenge. I think that would have just been a stronger storytelling choice. But what I'm talking about is the movie goes out of its way to not educate the audience about this conflict, right? Because it doesn't have any specifics. And if raising awareness is the point, then shouldn't it do that? And is it a better or worse movie because it doesn't?
No, I understand where you're coming from. And
like what was your experience watching this? Like, did you feel like you understood what was going on, and did you feel like you understood the nature of the conflict and why it's happening and the extent of it and all of that? Like any of that after having seen the movie?
I didn't understand the extent of it. All I just knew was the gist. So I knew, okay, cool. There's corruption within the police department, there's corruption within the government, and there's obviously woman brutality.
It's corruption, right? There's a far right Hindu movement that's essentially Hindu supremacist. It says India is by and for Hindus, and everybody else is maybe tolerated if they fall in line. And that includes things like kicking people off their land by declaring them holy sites, and having like citizenship laws that's basically essentially are designed to strip people of civil rights if they're not Hindu. Things like that, right? That's not even corruption. Like these people are not doing that for personal gain exactly. They're doing this to advance their in-group.
Okay.
I think I need to see this movie again because I feel like I've missed a lot of the like important stuffs from it. So it's like even difficult for me to even like add any comments on here, which is.
And is it reasonable to expect the movie to have filled in those blanks for you?
No, I think more so just because like I was like super tired and I was like in and out of sleep. So like some of the context, some of it was like missed on my part. So I like at the moment I can't blame the movie. I have to like blame myself for it in terms of like what was missed. Okay. Like from what you're saying, I can like, and from what I can remember, I didn't get like the message in terms of like what you're saying. Obviously, I understood the whole like people being displaced and this and the other, but again, it was just like in the context of like being in and out of sleep. So like the wider like implications of it and stuff like that, I don't think I can comment on it too much at the moment without having seen it again.
So in general, if you're making a movie that is about that and for that purpose, is it a reasonable expectation to actually explain the specifics? Or just go off vibes, which is what
in a way that doesn't bog down the movie, because at the end of the day, it's piece of entertainment. People are sort of kind of there to be entertained, and you don't want to bog down the movie by like hitting people over the head with a message. But from what you're saying is that they didn't do
this movie takes on a sledgehammer with the message written on it, and then right, it's not subtle.
Of course, it's not extremely subtle in terms of like it's messaging, but it's like how much of the nuances and how much of the sort of like kind of like subtleties can it like fit in, and like like does it need to explain everything to like?
Does it have to explain something?
I mean, it has to explain.
So let's take a step back from this movie, right?
Yeah.
And just in general, right? There's an injustice going on in the world, and you're watching a movie because you're interested and you want to learn more.
Yeah.
Is it a reasonable expectation of the movie for the movie to actually explain this stuff to you and communicate at minimum who the participants are and what the nature of the conflict is and like what it entails?
At bare minimum, you have to know sort of both sides of the conflict. You have to know sort of the oppressed and the oppressor in it. You have to understand, why. Like you have to understand like the basic premise of like why there is a conflict in the first place and this and the other. So on that note, I agree. And from what you're explaining is that they haven't done it well enough for the oppressed in this movie, where they haven't like maybe sort of shown too much of a light or like given too much of a voice to them, it seems.
But maybe his goal wasn't to tell us why; it was just to tell us what is happening.
But did he?
Well, we now from the film, I could say that. Okay, I know that I could say that women aren't being, well, not all women, but women aren't being treated good, and the police department aren't good, and yeah, the government is just not good as well from the film. So maybe that's just he just wanted to give us a basic understanding of what's going on in India, and you could say his personal thoughts were cool. Now this is my way. Okay, we should fight back, but obviously in an exaggerated way, which is by killing them all. But obviously that's exaggerated. So yeah, maybe his main purpose was just to tell us what is happening rather than give us the inside scoop and tell us literally just tell us everything that's going on. Maybe it was just okay, this is what's going on, and yeah, he just wants to present it as this package.
Okay, yeah, my contention is just if the point is to educate and raise awareness, then you should probably explain some stuff.
But that's the thing though, is like, because we don't know what it is. I think.
Well, I mean, you can read like the Wikipedia article in 2 minutes and get a basic sense of it. But I'm just saying you can't even understand what's going on in the movie without having that background knowledge. If you're just going completely unaware, I don't think the movie actually tells you what's going on. It says here's bad guys, here's good guys, and that's kind of it.
So when I say what is, I meant in terms of like what he was trying to do with the film. If it was a thing where he was trying to educate us, or was a thing where he was just trying to literally create a fun film while informing us what's going on in India.
I just don't think you can really say that the movie is just out to be a fun, exciting action thriller in the setting of the social dynamic. Well, so I think very clearly the point of the movie is to raise awareness of what's going on.
Do you feel like maybe part of it, again, because he's like a first-time director, and I don't, I'm not sure who wrote it as well, but it's quite like I said, single sort of, very single vision in terms of like the writing of this. Can some of it be excused because maybe he didn't know how to incorporate it well enough in his like maybe first movie, etc.? Can we maybe offer some type of leeway because of that?
Yeah. So story is by Dev Patel, screenplay is by 3 people, including Dev Patel. So this is his story, right?
It's his story.
I think from a first-time director you can expect mistakes, and I think you should forgive them. But these are not details, right? This is the entire thing.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And I think it's actually kind of a bit of a shame, because I don't think there's many movies in the West that talk about this conflict. And it would have been nice if it actually educated people. And I think there's a way of doing that without being preachy and without it being a lecture. You can just establish who the different parties are, and like this some of it is scattered throughout the movie in like bits and pieces and in parts of lines, right? But I just don't. I think it's made too personal, and it's left out. Like it leaves out the details, the specifics, and I think it just purely comes down to the elites are bad, and I don't think there's much value in that, because there's hundreds of movies like that already, and this was an opportunity to really bring like attention to a very specific conflict that basically nobody can do anything about.
I understand. I get your point, and I understand where you come from. And again, without having the full context of the movie, it's kind of difficult to like say whether like I agree or disagree completely. I feel like I normally trust your judgment, so I will kind of like tend to agree with some of what you're saying there. And I'm probably it's not a movie that I'll probably watch again, so it'll be hard to even like have a second opinion on that, to be honest. But I do trust what you're saying in terms of like it not providing, like the more you're saying of it, and the more I'm like remembering of the movie. Again, if that's like the focus of the movie, like from what I'm remembering, it doesn't completely.
Like it could have just been a movie about like 15-20 years ago. This guy lost his mother as part of these events, and since then he's been dedicating his life to revenge. Right? That movie could that could have been the story, but it's really only part of the story. And then towards the end, it goes into the bigger, symbolic, dreamlike, almost mythic quality of it. And I don't know. Like I don't think you can say, well, this is just like an exciting action thriller, given what the movie is clearly trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you can judge movies on what they're trying to do, and this clearly is basically a political manifesto, right? It's basically like a declaration of like saying this, like issuing a thesis basically about what's going on and what's wrong in India and things like that. And I think if you judge it on that level, I don't know that it did its job, which pains me, because this is an original movie by a first-time director with a very charged topic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it actually talks about important topics, right? And this could have swayed the opinions of millions, right? Because they were previously unaware that this was happening. But I don't know that it really did.
Yeah.
Because you can only appreciate the story if you already know what's going on.
Yeah.
And at that point, you can't reach a general audience.
And a lot of the conversations that I've heard, like post the movie, of like maybe people that watched it, haven't really talked about the message behind it too much. So, you know, that maybe hits home in terms of what you're saying as well.
And the ones I've seen that do that basically already knew about this and already were on that side, and are just celebrating the fact that there's a movie about it, which is great and all. I just don't like it. It seems like a missed opportunity more than anything else.
Yeah.
And really avoidable too. Like, you could have had a couple of scenes that really establish what's going on here, and then you have the revenge story.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it seems doable to me.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. I mean, they definitely could have cut out all of the different flashbacks they had in this movie, because there was too many.
Well, do we have any highlight moments? Any favorite moments?
So for me, there wasn't really one scene that really stood out. I thought in general the action was quite competent, and I liked the. It was almost like a spy movie, right? Like, in terms of how it felt, like when he was infiltrating that hotel.
Yeah.
And like slowly gaining people's trust and moving on in the ranks, and like that entire sequence I thought was really well done. And it was like an onion, right? You kept peeling back layers, and each one was worse than the previous one. And I thought that that by itself has this tension built into it, and I thought it did that quite well.
Yeah. No, I can't disagree on that. Like I mentioned, you know, the final sort of kind of like action sequences, final fight scenes were, you know, really good for me. You know, really sort of solidify the protagonist as a solid character for me. I mean, a word on Dev Patel, you know, for his first action movie as well, you know, being both in front of the camera and behind the camera, gave a very good performance.
Filmed during COVID as well. There's a whole thing about how that movie almost didn't get made.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere where they had to film some of the scenes on his iPhone because they had, like, you know, issues with their cameras and like cameras breaking and stuff like that as well. So, you know, very, very well done. So, you know, both in front of and, you know, behind the camera. Like, he looked the part as well. Like, you know, his physique, and this was, like, you know, really good as well. But yeah,
on a purely emotional level, it really works.
Yeah.
It just, if you try to move beyond that, there's not much there.
Yeah, which is fair.
You know what? Have email to just start off the last words, you know, because you're pretty much, you know, you're pretty much halfway there already, unless you were finished. But
I mean, did we have another angle to it?
Well, in terms of, I think we've said our likes, we've said our dislikes. I was gonna ask about. Actually, no, there was one question I actually did have. Best performances. Was there any performances that stood out to you guys?
So I think Dev Patel gives a really good performance.
Yeah.
Just in terms of his quiet, suppressed rage that comes out in the end, or periodically when circumstances allow.
Very believable as well, especially when he's like confronting the police officer in the bathroom for the first time, and, like, you know, he's got the nerves of, like, you know, following through with it and stuff like that. I think it's very competent, very well done.
Favorite performance for me was the psychic. I can't believe you guys didn't like that guy. He was definitely the comedy that was needed. Sorry?
Alfonso, you mean?
Is that his name? Alfonso, yeah. He was definitely the touch that was needed in terms of, like, adding that comedic factor to the film. He did a really good role.
Without being too much, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It was just the right amount of joking and slimy and so on, right?
I also like that they didn't bog it down with the whole romance between him and that woman as well.
Yes.
From what I can remember, like they didn't like force it too much. It was just the right amount of it.
Mm. All right, guys. Well, I don't know if anyone's got anything more else to say. I think we've gone for everything. We've done the likes, we've done the dislikes.
Daniel hasn't finished pulling this movie.
Yeah, I can tell. That's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to suss out what more Daniel wants to say, because Daniel, do you have any unfinished? Any unfinished business you wanna dish out?
No, I think I've said my piece. And one thing that just one more impression that I got. This is not really a complaint. This is more an impression. It seems like there were a whole bunch of layers there that I couldn't really get at because I didn't have the cultural familiarity, right? Like in the very end, they reference like the story about this king and stuff like that. I think it's been a few days since I watched it, but it's something about how he tries to compare everything and destroys everything in the process, or something like that. I imagine I got about 10% of those references, and maybe that movie would have been better or more rewarding if I had been given that information. Just as somebody who has no previous connection to any of this. Now, the question is, how do you do it? Because like the standard way of doing it is to have like a fish out of water character who needs to have things explained to him, and clearly that would not have been the right choice. That would have bogged down the movie and would have been very artificial and all of that. But I don't know. I felt like I missed out on a whole bunch of layers just because I didn't have that previous knowledge.
Yeah.
And that brings it back to who is it for exactly.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Sometimes it makes you wonder, should they just kept this like a revenge, a revenge film rather than a film that has an important message. But at the same time, you do need something that stands out.
You can, like, the reason for him wanting revenge can be the message, right? But that would turn it into a very different movie with a very different structure.
Sure. Okay. Well, guys, I feel scared to ask this question in case anyone has anything else what they want to say, but last thoughts.
Very good movie, really good action. From what it seems, maybe got lost in the message a little bit towards Act 2, from sort of kind of how Daniel summarized it. But overall impressive for a sort of directorial debut, especially comparing it to what we've done previously in The Kitchen, which was also sort of kind of like Daniel Kaluuya's like first movie.
This is 10 times better than The Kitchen.
Yeah.
This does all the things that I complained about being missing from The Kitchen.
Like having
like actually showing what's going on.
Yeah, basically. So I mean in that sense, and not to kind of like bash on Daniel Kaluuya as well, but like, in comparison, this is a superior movie. So
yeah.
I think, really well done. And would be very excited to see what he does with a little bit more backing behind him.
Daniel, do you want to go next? Or?
Yeah, so my bottom line is that this is a really solid first movie. I just think it's got some storytelling issues and focus issues that prevent it from really being good, as opposed to being just promising. Maybe he needs Dev Patel needs a few more movies to kind of work out the kinks, and maybe his third or fourth or fifth movie will be stronger in those areas. I don't know. But I think this movie is just being dragged down by a bunch of creative decisions that I think dilute the movie and make it a weaker story. It's still a 5 out of 7 for me, because it's one person's clear vision. That vision was executed, and I can argue with how exactly it was executed, but there's very clearly stuff going on in this movie, and there's very clearly passion and emotion behind it, and I think that's commendable.
Is 5 out of 7 good?
Well, I mean, like, what else? Like, Madam Web was a 5 out of 13, just for
yeah.
Wait, Harvey, did you rate the film?
I'll give it a 7.5 out of 10.
Okay. Well, for me, I had a fun time, But at the same time, I do agree with the constructive criticism that was given today. I would actually be open to a part 2 of this film. Hopefully, if there was a part 2, well, depending on box office sales, but if there was a part 2, then I would want them to kind of like, start to unravel more what's actually going on in India and kind of, just educate us more and just, be, for it to be more clearer, the message to be more clearer. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of symbolism in it, which the regular audience who's not familiarized with what's currently going on might not understand, or make it cohesive with the vehicle of the film, which is revenge. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what the storyline will be for the second film, so I don't think it would be revenge. Maybe it might be revenge on Monkey Man himself, but yeah. But I'd give it a 6.5, maybe 7. I'd probably say 7. 6.5. Between 6.5, I'd say 6.75. I hate giving this type of ratings, but I'd say 7. 7. I give it a 7. Yeah. Cool. Okay, guys. Thank you for tuning in today. Next week we'll be reviewing Civil War, I believe. Yes, a film which I was looking forward to, but then Daniel mentioned important piece of information which might have changed my opinion, but who knows? We'll see. We'll watch it next week. But yeah, guys. Oh yeah, Hervé, please, your time.
Yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Cool. Guys, we'll catch you next week. Let us know what your thoughts below on what you thought about Monkey Man, and yeah, let us know if you agreed with any of our opinions or disagreed, and we will catch you next week. Thank you very much. Au revoir.